What I'm saying is that don't listen to the cynics. Don't listen to the people who tell you that your violence is somehow endemic to human nature, that we're savages, that, well, look at all the wars and people are just bad and whatever, right? That's all nonsense. That's all nonsense, because people just aren't bad. People don't like using violence, and it takes, if you want another chunk of proof of that, look at the amount of conditioning that it takes for somebody to be comfortable or at least desensitized to using violence. I mean, there's a reason that you put in basic training for months and months and months, and there's a reason that only certain people are allowed to come into a volunteer army. You have to have a tendency for a lack of empathy or desensitization, and then they have to just pummel you for months and years to get you to actually be comfortable with violence. I mean, look at the amount of propaganda. I mean, cop shows and pornography, like the war movies and so on. I mean, the amount of propaganda that people are subject to in order to get them to be comfortable with violence is just staggering. If it was such a natural human condition, well, we wouldn't need it. I don't need a lot of propaganda to have sexual drive, or to have a sexual drive, or to want to eat chocolate, or, to want to sit on the couch when I'm tired. I mean, that stuff just happens because it's part of my physiology and part of my nature as a human being. But in order to make people violent, you have to do a heck of a lot. You have to, beat them as kids. You have to yell at them as adults. You have to pay them. You have to tell them that it's all moral. You have to subject them to endless propaganda. You have to brutalize them emotionally in boot camp. I mean, you have to do a lot to twist someone into being a violent person. To me, it's sort of similar to, when I think it was in China, at the turn of the, I guess, mid-19th to early 20th century, the foot binding was very common, right? So you got these women who had their feet bound up in excruciating tightness, and then their feet were mutated, their toes were growing into their heels. I mean, it's just horrendous, right? So yes, it's certainly possible to shape a human foot into a ball, but it's not exactly natural. Or it's not exactly the natural state of a human foot, which is to grow, strong and straight and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, okay, some people are born with 6 toes and, dropped arches or whatever, but that's very much the exception. There is a natural and healthy human foot, and there is a natural and healthy human soul, which is, not always the most patient and kind of entities, but definitely not, some murderous, violent... if I don't get my rent reduced, I'm going to go shoot someone. That's just not how people are. There are people out there like that, just like there were Chinese women with bound feet. But, what you need to do is to look at the circumstances that produced these personalities, rather than sort of imagine or believe that these personalities are somehow natural. There's lots of these human predators out there, and boy, oh boy. I mean, okay, one final example, just because I'm almost home. Got another 2 minutes. One final example is, just look at religion, right? I mean, when people were forced, when children were forced to go to Sunday school, and everybody had to be religious, and if you weren't religious, you were shunned and you were whatever, an outcast, then wow, wouldn't you know it, lots of people are pretty religious. But now, if you look at sort of the modern middle class, religion is, kids really aren't taught to be religious. They go to church a couple of times a year, maybe a wedding or two, and Christmas and Easter maybe. But they don't really go for this whole religion thing. And so the natural human state, the natural state of the human soul is also atheistic. I know, of course, I'm using the word soul, blah, 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 but I just mean that for the totality of consciousness and emotional apparatus and physiology and so on. The natural state of a human being is pacifist and atheistic, and don't believe in the government, really. Sure, there's tons of people out there to the contrary, but that's just a mark of an enormous amount of pressure that's been put on them emotionally, physically, and so on, to conform to all of that nonsense. And as soon as we start correcting people's thinking, proving a better argument and showing the value of a better world and the morality of a better world of pacifism, and forget about self-defense and don't be violent, then, we'll have exactly what we need, which is people who believe in violence and the natural virtue of the human soul. And boy, won't that be just a beautiful, beautiful world. Thanks for listening.